How's everybody doing today? Today we're getting into Access, which is our next software after Excel. Access is quite different than Word or Excel. In order to do anything in Access, what you have to do first is you have to create a database, and then secondly, you have to add tables into that database. You really can't add any data to Access until you have a database and you have at least one table. So I'm going to go through the process of doing just that. First off, you need to bring up the Access software. You'll get a screen like this. And the next thing you want to do is select blank desktop database. So I'm going to click on this. And what it'll do is it brings me to an area in Access where it kind of sets up a table for me. I don't really like to utilize this table. I always want to be in design mode when I get to a part where I want to create a table. So typically what I do is I just close this out and I kind of start fresh. I say I want to create, I want to go table design, and that puts me into design mode, which is a much more efficient way to create a table. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a table which is going to be similar to one of the tables you have to do for homework. The table I'm going to create is going to allow me to keep track of the movies that I have. Maybe I've got a bunch of movies on DVD and I want to keep track of those. Typically in a database, what we do is it's utilized to keep track of information. So we build a table to keep track of things. But we have to decide first off, what pieces of information do I need in this table to keep track of this information? So for example, if you think about all the movies you might have, what is a piece of information that you would need to define that? Each individual piece of information is called a field. So I could say, well, obviously one thing I need here to define this information is I need a movie title. So I'm going to go ahead and type in movie title. Once you decide on a field, the other thing that you want to do is you always have to make sure you select a data type. Now it's going to have a default, which is short text, and for us, for movie title, that works just fine. Short text is mostly anything that's going to be less than 50 characters. You'd usually define it as short text. So I say, alright, I definitely want to know the movie title as part of my database. It's short text. If I wanted to put a description here, I could. If your field name is a little vague, for example, other people might not understand what you're looking for here, a lot of times you can put a description. But if your field name is pretty straightforward, like this one is, I probably wouldn't bother doing a description. The other thing you can do is you can go down here in this area and change any of the properties of these fields that we're going to put in. You can do all kinds of things down here. We're not going to do much of that today. We might in a later video. Okay, what else can you think of? I want the movie title. What else would I want? Another one I decide I want is a movie release date. And you want to be careful with the data type here. You want to be sure that you select date and time. Anything like birth date, movie release date, that should be a date and time field. If you designate it as a date and time field, Access has all kinds of really cool date time functionality that you can apply to this field. But if instead you just say, the movie release date, I'm just going to look at this as text, then you can't use any of that neat date time functionality on it. That's why it's very important to look at your data types closely. Another field that I decided that I want is movie type, and it is short text. Now in this one I did put a description just because if somebody else was looking at my database, they might not understand what I mean by movie type. So over here I kind of explain it. Yeah, it's like comedy, drama, action, horror. Another field I decided I wanted was movie format. It's short text. And again, I put a description here because I want to make sure people know what I mean. Maybe I've got some really old movies on VHS, I've got some on Blu-ray, I've got some on DVD, I've got some on MP4. So I just want to define what format I have them on. So I look over this list of fields and I'm thinking, well, I can't think of anything else that I want to keep track of. If I know the title, the release date, the type of movie, the format that it's on, I decide I should be good to go. One other thing I just wanted to show you, because you have to do it in your homework, I ask you to change the format of one of your date fields to short date. To change the format, what you have to do is you have to go down here into properties, and I click on the format row and I click on the little down arrow and I see I have all these choices. I'm going to just change this to short date, which is just going to display it as, say, 10, 12, 15. It's not going to include the day or anything, so it'll take up a little bit less space. So I'm looking at this. I've done everything I want to do to it as far as setting up the table. Now remember, in Access you have to create the table before you can put in any data. At this point I am actually ready to start entering data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to click on the save icon. It asks you for a table name. I'm going to call this one Movies, and I hit OK. It says there's no primary key defined, and you can define a primary key if you want to. If you have a very large database, it is helpful. I'm not going to, because this is just a little database and I just don't want to mess around with it. So I'm going to say no, I don't want to do this. What I want to do at this point, I have the table saved and I decide I would like to now go add some data to it. So I'm going to go to View and Datasheet View, and it says, okay, now I can add some data. So this is the point where you can just start adding some data. I'm just going to start making up some data. Let's say I've got the movie Rocky, and I'd have to specify where, if it was Rocky 1 or Rocky 2 or Rocky 17. The release date, what they do with this, the release date, you can, since you formatted it as a date, you can use the date time picker. This would be kind of a pain for me because I'd have to go all the way back to like 1978. So I'm just going to type it in myself. I'm going to make a guess that that was released on 09/09 78. Movie type, I'll put drama. And movie format, let's say I have this on DVD. And then I can go down to my next one, and I can add as many movies as I want. So that's the process. Hopefully that was understandable. First off, you have to go in, create a database. Secondly, you have to create a table. Now, once you have this database created, we can add as many tables as you want and add as much data to each table as you want. For your homework, you have to do two tables. You have to do Friends, and you have to do one called Music. But you can put them in the same database. You do not have to create a separate database for each of these tables. If I wanted, at this point, to create another table right now, I said I'm done entering data, I can just close this table. It always saves everything. You don't have to save the data once you put it in. Let's say, for example, I've got my movies table and now I want to go create my Friends database. I just go Create, Table Design. I could go to Friends, and that's going to be another table. So remember, for this homework assignment, two different tables, put them in the same database, upload them to Access. You should be all set. Anyhow, hopefully this was helpful. We'll see you next time.